Okay, so today we're doing a deep dive into the Mediterranean diet.
Yeah.
Which, everyone's sort of fruits, veggies, olive oil, all that good stuff.
Right.
But we're going a little deeper here.
Absolutely.
You sent over some really fascinating research looking at the impact of this diet on some pretty important things. We're talking metabolic syndrome, even cancer risk and lifespan. So, ready to dig in?
Yeah, it's a hot topic for a reason. And like you said, it's not just about the food itself. This research gets into the how and why the Mediterranean diet might actually be so good for us, especially now, when more and more people are dealing with obesity and all the health problems that come with it.
And speaking of which, it's pretty timely because I was reading that by 2030, the projection is something like 2 billion people overweight globally,
Wow.
with over a billion in the obese category, which is, those are huge numbers.
Absolute massive, yeah. It really highlights why, we're looking at different dietary approaches like this one, the Mediterranean diet. Got to understand them.
For sure. And you mentioned metabolic syndrome,
Yeah.
which is a good place to start because it's a big part of what this research really focuses on that connects with the Mediterranean diet. But
Right.
for anyone who's maybe not familiar with that term, how would you explain metabolic syndrome? It's more than just like carrying a few extra pounds.
Yeah, you got it. It's not just about being a little overweight. Think of it more like it's a cluster of different things.
Yeah.
We're talking high blood pressure, high blood sugar, extra weight, especially around the middle, and then you throw in cholesterol problems on top of that.
Yeah.
And together, all of those things, they really increase your risk for some serious stuff. Heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes. It can really snowball.
And this research we're looking at, it uses the term adiposopathy,
Yeah.
which sounds kind of scary, honestly.
Yeah.
It's like another way of saying obesity or...
It's definitely related, but it's more specific, more nuanced. So it's not just about how much fat someone's carrying around. It's about how healthy that fat tissue actually is.
Okay.
Because when fat tissue isn't functioning properly, and this research, they call that sick fat, which,
Sick fat.
Yeah, that's the term. And basically what happens is it releases these inflammatory substances that can really mess with all your body's systems.
So like 2 people could have the same BMI, but one person's fat tissue is actually healthier than the other person's.
Exactly. You got it.
That really changes how you think about weight and overall health.
For sure. And this is where it gets even more interesting. The research goes into different, what they call obesity phenotypes, which are basically different ways that obesity can manifest.
Okay.
And there's one in particular that really caught my eye called normal weight obese, or NWO.
NWO. So that's someone who, like, they look healthy, they have a normal BMI, but they're what's still considered obese.
It seems counterintuitive, but that's exactly it. On the outside, they might seem perfectly healthy, but inside, they have a high percentage of body fat. So their metabolic health is telling a different story. The NWO group is a perfect example of why we need to go beyond just looking at BMI to really assess someone's health.
Yeah, it's like a hidden risk. So someone could be at risk and not even know it. Okay, so we've talked about metabolic syndrome, sick fat, all that fun stuff, but how does the Mediterranean diet actually fit into all of this? It's not like a magic cure-all. So what's the link to improving metabolic health?
All right, so this is where it gets really interesting. This is where we get into nutrigenomics and nutrigenetics.
Oh boy, big words.
I know, right? But basically, these fields look at how our genes and our diet interact, like how the foods we eat can actually affect how our genes express themselves.
Hold on, you're telling me that what I eat can change how my genes actually work?
To a certain degree, yeah.
Yeah.
This research talks about these things called thrifty genes, and the idea is that these genes, they helped our ancestors survive back when food was scarce, like way back, by storing energy super efficiently. But now in our modern world, where we have way more food than we need, those same genes, they might actually be contributing to obesity and metabolic problems.
So we're like hardwired to overeat, even though we don't need to anymore.
That's the gist, yeah. It really makes you appreciate the importance of working with our biology. And the Mediterranean diet, the way it focuses on whole foods, healthy fats, it seems like it actually works with these thrifty genes instead of against them.
Interesting.
So it's like it helps to kind of, mitigate some of those predispositions that we've inherited.
Wow. Okay. So we're basically giving our genes a fighting chance, but with what we choose to eat.
Exactly.
So we can actually, outsmart our genes a little bit, or at least work with them?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
By making smarter choices. And this research really gets into those choices. Going beyond just the general idea of the Mediterranean diet, right? It actually breaks down some of those specific foods and what the science says about them.
Yeah, that's the really cool part, getting into those details, those specific ingredients.
Yeah.
And one that takes center stage here is olive oil, especially the extra virgin kind.
Of course, it's always olive oil, but what's so special about it, according to these studies?
Well, for one, it's like the gold standard when it comes to heart health. This research, it talks about how olive oil can actually help to protect the endothelium.
And the endothelium, remind me, that's...
Yeah, that's the lining of your blood vessel.
Right, okay.
It's actually really important, and it can get damaged, so protecting it is key.
So it's like a shield for our artery.
Yeah, exactly. Think of it like that. But it's not just about protection. Olive oil's got those antioxidants everyone's talking about,
Right.
which, they help fight cell damage. And this research actually found that olive oil, it can actually improve insulin sensitivity.
Okay, and that means, see, I always get insulin sensitivity and resistance mixed up.
Basically, it means your body's using insulin more efficiently, which is huge for keeping your blood sugars stable and preventing type 2 diabetes.
Gotcha, so it's a good thing.
Definitely. And speaking of good things, we got to talk about another Mediterranean staple.
Tomatoes.
Oh, yeah, tomatoes. Can't go wrong with those.
Right.
Are we talking about, like, some fancy heirloom variety here, or...?
Nope, just your regular tomatoes from the store.
Yeah.
They're packed with this stuff called lycopene.
Lycopene, right? And that's a powerful antioxidant. And the studies in this research, they found that it's got some pretty amazing effects on inflammation, blood pressure, and get this, even body composition.
Wait, hold on. Body composition. You mean tomatoes could help with weight management?
There's actually a study mentioned here where they found that drinking tomato juice, it was linked to a smaller waist circumference.
Wow.
Seems like the lycopene, it might play a role in reducing fat storage, especially around the belly.
Okay, well, I would not have guessed that.
It's surprising, but pretty cool, right?
It is, yeah. I mean, who knew something so simple could have such an impact? So what other Mediterranean marvels did this research uncover?
Well, we can't talk about antioxidants without mentioning berries, specifically blueberries and strawberries.
Yeah, berries are good.
They're loaded with these things called anthocyanins, which, you guessed it, more antioxidants.
More the better, right.
Exactly. And these anthocyanins, they have some serious anti-inflammatory powers. Some studies here actually showed that blueberries and strawberries, they could actually help lower blood pressure, which, that's huge for overall health.
So it seems like inflammation is really like the common thread here. And the Mediterranean diet, it's almost like it tackles it from all angles.
Yeah, exactly. That's such a good point. It's about all those different components working together to get that synergistic effect.
Okay, and I know we can't forget about one of the most enjoyable parts of this diet.
Are you talking about the wine?
Maybe just a little.
Of course, a glass of red wine. In moderation, obviously, it's often associated with the Mediterranean lifestyle. And the science actually supports it, at least to some extent.
Okay.
There's this compound in red wine called resveratrol, and it's got those anti-inflammatory benefits that we keep coming back to.
But a glass or two a week, not a bottle a day. Right?
Exactly. Moderation is key, just like with everything. But it is interesting how even those enjoyable parts of this way of eating can actually have some positive effects.
For sure. But let's not get too distracted by the wine.
Right.
Because we've covered a lot about metabolic health. But, initially I had mentioned cancer risk as well. And that's another area where this research really piqued my interest.
Definitely. We can't forget about that.
So what does the science say about the Mediterranean diet and its potential impact on cancer risk?
Well, you know how we talked about obesity and chronic inflammation, how they're both linked to higher cancer risk? Well, this research, it actually points out that people who live in the Mediterranean region, they tend to have lower cancer rates compared to places like, say, Northern Europe or the U.S.
That's really interesting. It's got to be more than just a coincidence, right? I mean, diet has to play a role there.
It's highly likely, and there are actually several studies within this research that found a connection, specifically between sticking to the Mediterranean diet and a reduced risk of some specific cancers, like breast cancer and colorectal cancer.
So all those antioxidants and anti-inflammatory benefits, they're working on a bigger level, potentially protecting against cancer too.
That's the idea, yeah. And while it's important to remember that correlation doesn't necessarily equal causation, the evidence is definitely compelling. I mean, it suggests that this way of eating, all those antioxidants that focus on reducing inflammation, it could play a role in cancer prevention.
This is really making me rethink my grocery list for next week.
Yeah.
It really makes you think twice about those everyday choices, because it's more than just losing a few pounds. We're talking about potentially preventing some really serious diseases here.
Absolutely. It's a bigger picture for sure.
It really puts things in perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But there's one more thing I wanted to touch on, and it's something that, well, it always seems to get people's attention: longevity. Are we really talking about, like, a diet that can help us live longer?
Yeah, it's the age-old question, right? And this research, it actually dives into some fascinating stuff about cellular aging to kind of give us some clues. It focuses on these things called telomeres, which you've probably heard of them.
Telomeres, yeah, vaguely. It's like way back in the recesses of my brain from like high school biology.
Yeah, exactly. But basically, they're these tiny structures. They're like caps on the ends of our chromosomes.
Right, like those protective caps on our DNA, and they get shorter as we age, right?
Exactly. It's a really good analogy. Think of it like, the little plastic tips on the ends of your shoelaces?
Yeah.
Those are aglets. And telomeres, they're like the aglets of our DNA. They keep those strands from like fraying and unraveling.
So they're pretty important.
Essential. Actually, they protect our DNA every time a cell divides. But the thing is, they naturally get shorter over time.
Right, part of the aging process.
Exactly. But here's the really interesting part. What researchers are finding is that lifestyle factors, especially diet, they can actually affect how quickly those telomeres shorten.
So what you're saying is if we make healthier choices, we could potentially slow down the aging process at a cellular level.
That's what the research is suggesting, yeah.
Wow.
It's not like we're going to stop aging altogether, but it's more about, maintaining the health of our cells for longer, which obviously has a big impact on overall health and longevity. And this research specifically, it found this really interesting connection between sticking to the Mediterranean diet and having longer telomere length.
So it's pointing to a link between this way of eating and, like, actually adding years to your life.
It's definitely possible. But again, it's important to remember it's not just about individual foods here, right?
Right, it's the whole picture.
Exactly. It's about the whole dietary pattern, combined with all the other lifestyle factors we've been talking about. It's about moving our bodies. It's about enjoying meals together, managing stress. It all works together.
So it's not just what you're eating. It's this whole approach to living that, like, goes hand in hand with the Mediterranean diet.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes it so sustainable and honestly just more enjoyable. It's not about deprivation. It's about like really savoring delicious whole foods, having those meals with loved ones, staying active. It's like a recipe for a good life.
It sounds so simple when you put it like that.
It is. In a way, it's like common sense, but it's backed by science, which is pretty cool.
That is cool.
Yeah.
Now, I do have one last question about this research. There's a lot of emphasis on the entire dietary pattern of the Mediterranean diet.
Yeah.
But what if someone, like, can't completely adopt it? Like, can they still get some benefit from just incorporating certain elements?
That's a great question. And honestly, it's probably what most people are wondering. And while, yeah, the research highlights the synergy of like the whole package, the reality is even making some changes, like just adding more fruits and vegetables, using olive oil, cooking at home more often, those things can definitely have a positive impact.
So it's not like all or nothing. It's about taking those baby steps, finding what works for you, and just trying to, I don't know, move in the right direction.
Exactly. Every little bit counts when it comes to our health.
This has been, honestly, a really eye-opening deep dive. Thank you so much for, like, breaking down this research for us.
Yeah, of course. My pleasure.
It's so important to really understand the why behind those healthy choices.
I agree. Absolutely.
And on that note, I think we'll wrap up this deep dive into the Mediterranean diet. We hope you've learned some new things and that you're feeling inspired to, well, embrace a healthier way of living. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep into the world around you.